This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto, Knuckles OX, and Baba Snake. Flashing back, we find ourselves in the midst of a Crusher Corps celebration, as after successfully decimating yet another planet in South Galaxy that was not yet under the thumb of Frieza, the mighty Turles has given his team of terrifying conquerors leave to relax and ready themselves for more pillaging. However, this does not mean they are going to be idle, as when Rasen informs his boss that Alec is calling, the Saiyan pirate captain gathers the other members of his corps to attend him. Upon spotting this most unsubtle showing of force when the video call begins, Alec questions if his business partner is trying to intimidate him, though blithely, Turles retorts that he has no need to, as they're all members of his aptly named Crushing Heat Alliance here, nodding with a knowing smirk that the Saiyan is right of course, in a way that sets Vegeta's jaw to clenching as it reminds him of Frieza's smug simpering. Alec nonchalantly informs the band of privateers that he wants them to circle around the outer rim of space and come back to North Galaxy, while stopping off to pick up gas from another job. Ignoring the Heeter's attempt to drag him into the intrigue implicit in hearing Alec's #1 bodyguard and bounty hunter is in that area of space, and more shockingly, away from his precious big brother, Turles gruffly asks what the rush is, as the Heeter boss has always urged him to go low and slow as he put it, so they don't attract any unwanted attention. However, seeming as if he's being forced to improvise, rather than playing one of his usual detailed and compartmentalized long cons, the long-locked alien replies that this next job he has for him isn't business, or at least, not purely business, as while conducting his semi-legitimate operation as a planet scout and broker for Frieza, he discovered a nice little blue dirt ball called Earth. At once, it stuck out to him as a decent hideout, as it's pretty far out of Frieza's way, or at the very least, it is a fertile enough plot of land to plant a premium tree of might, and so he dispatched some of those nifty surveillance drones that Lacazette and Rasen were so helpful to make for him to do a more detailed scan of the planet. However, what they found is far more interesting than anything he bargained for. At once, the display bearing his face is replaced with scenes of a forest fire, being fought off by members of the Sonchun Siryu clan, as seen in the actual Tree of Might film. The sight of Raditz the Runt alive and well shocks and enrages Nappa and Vegeta, not just because he betrayed them rather than dying like they assumed, but because that coward actually had the gall to abandon the Frieza Force before they did, making them look spineless in comparison. At the sound of their griping, Turles sharply instructs Nappa to shut up, while silencing Vegeta with a less threatening but still forceful look. Though in that unctuous voice of his, Alec urges his business partner not to be so hard on them, as he quite understands their anger, considering the green-haired brat in the video broke contract with him as well when he up and disappeared on him one day, along with an Namekian geezer, though he supposes he can't be too mad at the boy, as the sight of his face is what got him to look at this place even closer, since a couple of Saiyans and Ceruleans both choosing such a perfect hiding spot is simply too coincidental. Plus, if he recalls correctly, there was something in the old legends about the green slug people having hitherto unrivaled magic, so he wanted to look into those as well, though that is when he stumbled upon the real kicker. The discovery so juicy, Gas insisted on accompanying Turles to the planet, despite the whole hating him business he has going on. Once again, not biting at Alec's attempts to tempt him into whatever game he's playing, Turles smirks at the Heeter to spit it out already, and sighing in what is clearly affection, Alec acquiesces, revealing snippets of video from the Dead Zone or World's Strongest instance, as well as the notable power levels the drones had picked up before they mysteriously disappeared. It was the darndest thing, since as someone with such an impressive battle power as Turles would know, those don't just vanish, at least not without the sort of tech this mudball doesn't have. But then, just when he was at his wit's end, he found their culprits, and this is the bit he knows Turles is gonna want to see. However, in spite of this big talk, the Crusher Corps Commodore is initially at a loss for what his patron is showing him, as it appears to be grainy footage of an amusement park. At first, he has to squint to even make out what to us is a familiar patchworked family posing under the guise of simple earthlings. But then he spots it, a silhouette, which despite the lack of clarity, is a dead ringer for himself. And while he knows there were dozens, maybe even hundreds of low-class Saiyans with that hair back before Planet Vegeta fell, a feeling deep in his gut tells him that this is his worm of a half-brother, cheating death once again with no concern for the bodies he leaves in his wake. Recognizing the varying levels of shock, indifference, curiosity, and bewilderment of the Crusher Corps' expressions, Alec snarks that it shouldn't take a genius sleuth like himself to piece together the mystery from there, though there is one last curious factor to this tale. He then indicates the green-haired woman in the footage, and notes that he killed her on planet Cereal personally, so her reappearance is just as unexplainable as forest regrowing overnight, or droughts being reversed. It seems planet Earth is not only rich in resources and nutrients that make it a prime AAA grade selection for either sale or fruit production, but there is also some kind of magic to it, and if that magic can be harnessed for profit or gain, preferably through the course of trade and negotiation, though if strictly necessary, necessary through force, he wants to know about it. And should that acquisition of knowledge also happen to allow Gas and Turles to reunite with the scarred Saiyan they're both so fixated on, all the better. Though, he wants to make one thing abundantly clear. While he will condone violence as a negotiation tactic, they are not to commit wholesale slaughter until they know exactly how to maximize Earth's profitability and have taken steps to ensure this profit, as he will not see some of the most valuable resources they've found in years wasted over a silly personal vendetta. Understandably, the reactions to this new objective are varied, with Turles being surprisingly quiet and contemplative, while Vegeta seems to be focused on Turles' response. Nappa is still torn between his feelings of resentment towards Raditz, and now Turles for having completely stolen his only other protege from him, as well as the shock at seeing Gine, who is surely the last living Saiyan female. As for the twins, they are most intrigued by the implications of magic, while Amon, Kakao, and Dai stand simply ready to serve as the wings and sword of the mighty man they believe will one day reign as the rightful pirate king of space. Nonetheless, at Turles' command, they set course for their new heading, with the detour to collect gas having suddenly become a galling task to the pirate leader. Seeing this, Alec reminds the Saiyan that it will be his responsibility to manage his little brother, as with that temper of his, and the vendetta he has against Bardock, he likely won't be interested in talking so much as fighting, which could be problematic for Turles' objective. Knowing better than to ask why Alec saddled him with that bloodthirsty brat, or suggest something pointless like leaving him on the ship, Turles instead adopts his usual bravado, as he states that if that's the case, he'll send some envoys to make sure the message gets across, while also keeping Gas on a tight leash. Looking over the crew, Turles points out Nappa, stating that despite him being a dimwit, even he can't screw up messenger duty. Just tell the Earthlings their demands, ask about their magic, and don't let Gas kill anyone till they find out. Got it? Letting out a hesitant but resolved grunt, Nappa nods his understanding before departing to his quarters to make preparations for what will surely be a harder job than his boss is letting on. Evidently, he is not the only one who is less than thrilled with the arrangement. As sighing deeply, Alec ends the call, leaving Vegeta free to approach Turles, who even now stands stock still beneath the grainy screenshot of the scarred Saiyan's family as he stares at the face so similar to his. Clearing his throat to get the pirate captain's attention, the young prince bluntly tells his master, a term he never felt enough respect to deem Nappa with as his mentor and caretaker, that they both know Gas is too strong for Nappa to control, even after the 5 years worth of fruits he's had since joining the Corps, and the emergency fruit he'll be carrying with him. In fact, someone weaker than him being in charge may even set Gas off more. Not to mention, if that blue freak is riled up enough to be disobedient to Alec, and something gets in his way or annoys him, the planet is likely to become fruit fodder regardless of what happens. Still smirking, the Corps boss asks what if he has, to which the prince in an equally challenging tone answers that it doesn't make sense, since from what he's heard about this Bardock, a chance to fight and kill him should be a dream come true for the mighty space pirate. So why would he give it up? Unless he's not. Smirk only growing, Turles playfully chides the royal brat for reading his mind so well, stating it a sure win gamble either way for him, since if that's really who he thinks it is on Earth, then he just may be able to find a way to survive or run it with Gas again. And if he doesn't, then big whoop. They'll still get paid, or get a premium fruit for the Tree of Might. And this way, they can say hello before they have a real talk. And thus, we find ourselves back in the present, ensconced in the ruins of the World Tournament Stadium, as Bardock demands to know what's going on, having no more need to use stealth now that they've confirmed the presence of Saiyans, Ceruleans, and Namekians. The duo representing the Crushing Heat Alliance do away with their specially designed cloaks, courtesy of the twins, causing their power levels to skyrocket, as the material is woven with substances that can block key readings from both scouters and sensory abilities. At the sight of them, Bardock is briefly struck dumb, as he knows both of Ana's assailants from his past. One of King Vegeta's flunkies, who slaughtered and snowballed his way up to the rank of mid-class Saiyan General, and that berserker brat from the Heeter Crew that whooped his ass all over planet Cereal and caused him to tuck his tail and run to Earth in the first place. Unfortunately for Bardock, Gas remembers this the same way, and having thought of little else but finishing the only foe to ever escape him, the Heeter begins radiating even more power, with Nappa's scouter warning him of this, causing the older Saiyan to bark at the Mad Dog to cool it, since they still have to talk and deliver a message, reminding him that he only allowed him to kill that Earthwoman because she wouldn't admit whether or not there were 2 Saiyan females on this planet. For a moment, it looks as though Gas is going to maul his partner then and there, though shockingly, after a deep breath, he makes a genuine effort to hold his space horses, as this was after all what Alec wanted as well. Hearing the stupid and cruel reason behind Anan's second death, Bardock notices his duffel bag and the bright blue skies have been destroyed and scattered across the ground near his fallen friend, currently soaking in her blood for her choice to protect Gine's secret in more ways than one. Once, he would have never grieved an Earthling, but now, a sense of guilt overwhelms him, serving as the tinder for burning rage as he roars out his intent to slaughter these gods for what they did. With this declaration comes a flaring aura that sends debris flying at the invaders, while pushing Nappa and Devilman back a bit. So in spite of this, Gas is able to force his way through and cross the distance between him and the scarred Saiyan, barking back at Nappa in a calm fury that he knows exactly what he's doing. Then, with a suddenly manifested steel-toed kick to the chin, he launches Bardock completely off Papaya Island, before chasing after him just as aggressively as he started this assault. Suddenly torn, both Devilman and Nappa call out for the two to wait, before glaring at one another, in preparation for their own fight. So it is at that moment the demonic anti-hero senses the powers of the other Z-fighters incoming, and so instead of wasting his time on what's obviously just a henchman, he stabs his pitchfork into the ground and transforms into his great Devilman form, shocking the brutish Saiyan as his power skyrockets, before spreading his black wings to begin chasing after Bardock and Gas at top speed. Swallowing his bafflement, as the only transformation he knows about outside of Uzaru is the one that Creep Zarbon used to have, Nappa prepares to follow. That is until his scouter warns him once again there are more incoming powers. A great many, in fact, as one by one, the strongest of our heroes able to fly at respectable speeds arrive at the horrible scene, just as Earthling residents and authorities of the island begin to do the same on foot. As they land, Raditz is shocked, and more than a little scared to see that Nappa is the source of one of these large evil keys, as he wonders if the brute has gotten way stronger, or was he just always so blatantly superior to him, while Nappa expresses his disgust with the disloyal deserter for giving into his cowardice and running to this weak planet full of insects. Though what should he expect from the kid of low-class trash? At these words, Gine steps in front of her son, her eyes both blazing and tearful, as her anger at this disparaging of Raditz and Bardock mingles with her guilt and sadness for Annan's demise, leaving her too choked up to verbally order the Saiyan man to watch how he speaks to her child. Nonetheless, Nappa understands her meaning, though in truth, he doesn't care especially, when to him, her tears stand as a sign of weakness, as he informs her in a patronizing, almost lascivious voice that she has no cause for fear, since he has no intention to harm or kill her, as she is far too valuable to the Saiyan race. As this happens, Ox King and Chi-Chi arrive by car not far behind the slower flyers, and as is natural, they begin to mourn over Annan. Remembering her grief for the sacking of Cereal, Muesli speaks up, taking the lead for her partner, and demanding they move things away from this populated area, with Nappa once again not caring one way or another, since less humans being around makes his job easier, however they go about it. So if they want to do this in a wasteland, fine by him. Meanwhile, Bardock and Gas have found their own rocky wasteland to battle in, with Bardock all too suddenly showing the same explosive rage as Gas, with the force of his revenge counter knocking the torque through a mountain as payback for the kick earlier. Since the moment he laid eyes on him and Nappa, his Saiyan blood has been boiling at a point he hasn't known for a long time, with him releasing ki and bloodlust potent enough that for a moment, his energy seems almost as evil and monstrous as the invaders. This is the sight Spike sees as he arrives, and when he asks the scarred Saiyan to explain what's going on, it becomes clear Bardock is far too angry to fight as smartly as he'd come to learn to, seeing him bet too heavily on his brute strength and the desire to vent his anger, to the point he simply follows after Gas and resumes their fight where it was left off on planet Cereal, much to Devilman's chagrin, as with that great oath in the way, he can't use his Devil Might beam to end this instantly. However, both Bardock and Gas by this point are so set on settling both old scores and new that Devilman is little more than a buzzing fly in their ears, as Bardock ferociously declares that he ain't running this time, while Gas snarls that he will have the Saiyan's head and tail as trophies. Fueled by this manic rage, they begin to level every cliff and mountain littered across the battlefield in a series of intense and brutal clashes, the only thing existing in either's mind being the other, and the sound he will make as the life ebbs from his body. Meanwhile, back on Papaya Island, as Roshi, Gohan, and the rest of those who can't fly or fight at these insane levels remain with Ox King and Chi-Chi as they weep and soon witness as Annan's body suddenly disappears, leaving them all shocked. That is until fortune teller Baba arrives in their midst to inform she simply moved on to the other world and been granted the use of her body this time, as she's gone on to achieve a great deal of heroic exploits beyond her guard of the sacred flame. Hearing this, Ox King is inspired to ask Gohan and the other elders to watch over Chi-Chi, and when his old friends ask why, he resolutely declares that he's going to honor Annan and join the battle. Cutting over to the fight with Nappa, it seems he is surprisingly the only one thinking clearly, with him taking this chance to fulfill his orders and exposit all that has happened in space since Raditz fled, such as how they're no longer with the Frieza Force, but instead an even more cunning and fierce faction who has laid claim to this planet. Henceforth, it is under the control of the Crusher Corps and Heeter Crew alliance, which is naturally a death sentence for all who will try to resist this new edict. Though luckily for this hodgepodge group of alien trash and runaways, they can still have a future. Just tell him what strange power they've been using to manipulate this planet and thwart death. As he says this, his eyes fall on Muesli in a way that makes an even deeper pit grow in our heroes' stomachs, as without sharing a word, they all know that if people like this find out about the Dragon Balls, all hope is lost. Seeing no one is being forthcoming, Nappa shrugs that he tried the easy way, so now he'll try the hard, and who better to start than with his old pal Raditz the Runt. However, in the meantime, he'll need something to play with the others. Luckily, he has just the thing, and best of all, they won't kill the Saiyan female. He then pulls out a vial full of green seeds, familiar to those who've been in Frieza-controlled space, before strangely adding the chewed-up remains of half of a spiky red fruit, which he spits into the ground with the seeds. Then, all too suddenly, as if a field of cabbage has sprung up around Nappa, an entire army of strange green creatures, which Goku comments look like the Biomen, appear one after another, roughly 300 or so of them, with tens of them standing out, as they are red and noticeably more powerful than the more common green ones. In total, a Cybermen yield far larger and more intimidating than normal, thanks to such mighty fertilizer. Pocketing his remaining fruit just in case, Nappa gives the order to the feral-looking creatures not to kill the Saiyan woman. And the green man too, and then to form a defensive line that allows only the long-haired brat past them, before then demanding in the same way he used to when the boy served under him, for Raditz to come here and receive his court-martial like a real Saiyan. Seeing Raditz tremble at this, his family and friends assure him that he's fine where he is, but shaking his head, Raditz summons his courage and walks past the enemy line, albeit hesitantly, as he is glared at menacingly by each of the vegetable men he has to pass by in order to face Nappa, whom he admits he did wrong alongside Prince Vegeta by abandoning them. There's no running away from that fact, but at the same time, he owes this planet of insects far more than he does the Saiyans who used to treat him like crap, so there's no way he's gonna let them or their heat pack or crush wheat or whatever alliance destroy this world. And with these words, Raditz drops his facade of fear to land a dynamite sucker punch square in the face of his daunting opponent, with the others taking this as the signal to finally begin fighting through the Cybermen army to come help. Though unfortunately, this is easier said than done, as while Gine is the second strongest fighter on Earth, she's utterly exhausted after the day she's had, and the Cybermen have a major numbers advantage, meaning they pose a greater threat than they usually would. Not just that, but extra care has to be given in making sure the less knowledgeable Earthling fighters like Krillin, Yamcha, Tien, and Chaozu know just how dangerous a common Cyberman is, let alone these new strange red ones, which our alien fighters take on, since they have the best shot, as they can still outpower or out-technique them in the cases of Gine and Goku, or employ the Bloody Eye's precognitive abilities to great use in Granola's case. Even Muzi begins subconsciously trying to tap into the power out of necessity, while for Raditz, it's not as if he was ignorant to how bad an idea one-on-one against Nappa is, since it reminds him of training with his father back when he had no patience. Though, on the smallest sliver of a bright side, at least while he's got Baldy occupied, he doesn't have to worry about him taking his grudge out on his family or their squishy friends. Unfortunately, his choice of reluctant martyrdom earns him no praise from Nappa or his allies, since the Big Oaf simply withstands everything he dishes out before giving it back tenfold, making the description of the violence being unleashed on him as punishment very apt. But Raditz, like his father, isn't running this time. Mercifully, before the long-haired boy can join Anon, the arrival of Ox King turns the tide, as channeling his own anger into a raging attack, he single-handedly wipes out most of the Cybermen and makes some breathing room for his allies, which Gine and Muzi accept gratefully, as it allows them to summon the reserves of their own strength for another spirit of the Saiyans empowered explosive wave and a bloody-eyed chain shot respectively, which tear through even more of the creepy little fiends. This in turn sees Goku and Granola able to group up and begin charging through the remaining line separating them from Raditz, since they no longer had to protect their friends from the Cybermen, especially since now they are converging on them to stop them. This inspires Goku to act a lot like Granola, as they wind up back to back while holding off the Horde, though this is not an issue, as now that they're back within their brother's earshot, they tell him to stop trying to handle things like a macho Saiyan would, and instead do it how they would. Together. Seeing his brother's point, Raditz tries to admit how stupid he was to listen to his pride again, though this is rather difficult, as at that moment, Nappa grabs him by the neck and lifts him into the air, wanting to make a show of snapping it. Naturally, the boy tries to struggle and call for help, though this is just a feint, as playing up his perceived cowardice, he yells like a maniac, while adopting a shrill and annoying tone, which is actually the result of him performing the difficult task of applying his ki to the sound waves to force Nappa to pay attention to him alone, while simultaneously stunning the big bruiser as his ears begin to ring, to the point of successfully disorienting and stunning him, from this audible equivalent to the solar flare, in a move Raditz dubs the aggro howl, or at least he would call it that if his opponents can actually hear him. Unfortunately, this move comes with an unintended side effect, that being that the remaining Cybermen now all begin converging on both Raditz and Nappa, forcing them both to be mindful and dodge around the feral creatures, as they instinctively go boom upon contact, having seemingly had their cabbage brains scrambled by the noise. Thankfully, this leaves plenty of openings for the Z-Fighters to surround and gang up on the Bald Saiyan, while Raditz directs and strategizes with them from the heart of danger, as he performs his own daring and often damaging stunts in an attempt to fell the giant and his horde. After enough of this, the Cybermen are finally wiped out, out, and the Z fighters, though tired, can regroup to finish the fight on their terms, though this will mean getting past Nappa. After witnessing Raditz' brains and guts, he no longer considers the boy a runty coward, though this does not mean he's given up on trying to kill him, to the point where, though it displeases him, he pulls out the remnant of his fruit and bites down. At once, the mini burns from the Cyberman's self-destructions, and Raditz's hits feel like space mosquito bites, as he is reborn, his power jumping astronomically, while before him, those who can sense Ki adopt looks of abject horror, and rightly so, as with his boost, he is able to steadily begin incapacitating more and more fighters, who've been exhausted by the battle so far. Though showing her own iron will and loving spirit, Gine leaps in front of most hits, forcing Nappa to pull back to a non-lethal amount of damage, as he will not kill her, even if it means sparing these vermin. Soon, only Gine, Piccolo, Muesli, and the boys remain, though before long, Muesli is down too, with Gine expending the last of her energy to save her partner, meaning the boys are all alone, and Nappa no longer has any reason to pull his punches. Cracking his knuckles menacingly, Nappa asks if the brats have any last words, though cheekily, Goku replies that he has too, Garlic Jr. At once, his brother's eyes light up, as they agree they've taken on one big dumb oaf before, and unlike him, this chump isn't immortal. And so Raditz uses his last words to point out Nappa's ignorance, stating they're gonna show him the true power of cowards, weaklings, and brats. Meanwhile, in another wasteland, Bardock has finally been forced to recognize his anger is beginning to blind more than fuel him, as he is yet to land a single decisive blow on Gas, while the opposite has certainly not been true. Glad to see that the spiky-haired brigand has come to his senses, Devilman at last steps in, informing Bardock that as a trident wielder, he's better equipped to handle an opponent who creates their own weapons. That is, unless Mr. Chun happens to have that extendable pole from the, incident. Remembering the ending to that fight just as fondly, Bardock apologizes that unfortunately, the power pole's back home, since weapons are illegal in the tournament. Huffily, Devilman sighs that in that case, he'll take point. Though speaking seriously, he needs Bardock to keep his head and work with him to avenge poor Miss Annan. Something the Saiyan can agree to, even if he still doesn't like the perverted anti-hero. Stepping back with the goal of supporting Spike instead of the other way around, Bardock is favorably impressed by the Devilman's power-up, with the pair turning the tables quickly, as all of Gas's attempts to overwhelm with his maneuverability, speed, and power are negated by the numbers and technique advantage. Not only that, but by passing off and sharing the mnemonic pitchfork between each other as it's needed, his weapons become easier to deal with, so that soon, Gas is all out of advantages, and dangerously close to being snuffed out, as he is cornered and finally held down by Bardock, who roars at Devilman not to worry about him, and to hit them both with the full power Devil Might beam. Back with the boys, they are caught in the heat of a fierce battle. In a testament to their accelerated growth as both warriors and sworn brothers, they have risen to the challenge again, taking what they know about each other and what they learned from their loss to Garlic to combine their powers into something truly terrifying, as the primary thing they learned from the immortal imp was nightmarish tenacity, as having seen Nappa amp up with the fruit, they attempt to turn it from a power-up into a debuff, as Raditz would put it, through the use of their left-right goodnight combo. However, this time, the focus for Goku and Raditz is to be as annoying as possible to distract Nappa, while Granola puts his stealth skills and ki control into use. Then, when Nappa rallies and recovers, they keep the pressure up to the maximum by putting all they have left in a final combined ki attack that hits the bald Saiyan hard after how long and drawn out the battle has become. By now, his scouter is long gone, which on top of creating all kinds of blind spots and openings for him without ki sense, also leaves him completely unaware of how large or small the gap between him and these Rugrats is by this point initially, thanks to the sheer unity, spirit, and focus the trio fight with, as subconsciously, they've even begun drawing on the memories and lessons taught to them by Bardock during their morning spars, displaying a true miracle of bonds, in the feat of their even being able to get this far against an opponent so much stronger than them individually, and hell, even as a joint force, simply by covering and fighting for one another as best as they can, allowing them to preserve each other somewhat, while willing away to him constantly. Unfortunately, Nappa's bulk is not just for show, as he displays a fortitude and stubbornness that gives Raditz a brand new respect for him. But even this is not enough to defeat this monster, and so smirking maliciously at the boys, he launches a Mighty Bomber DX they're forced to jump back from, only to end up blasted into the heat with the other defeated fighters. While he could kill them all now, he might as well do the job right, and so reaching for the last remnants of his fruit, he gives a hearty chomp down onto it, only to realize that isn't his fruit, but instead, a slow detonation ki blast in the shape of it. This realization comes only when the boys begin chuckling and giggling, despite the pain the act seems to cause. The old switcheroo having been their real goal rather than trying to brute force their way through it, as Granola holds up the stolen fruit remnant and destroys it with his brothers, just as a point-blank explosion goes off both inside Nappa's head and right in his face, as a consequence sense of accidentally eating a volatile ki attack without bracing himself, or preparation. This at last topples the massive brute, who is left with his mouth smoking and his jaw seemingly broken. But he's definitely still alive, a problem Granola intends to solve, until Raditz rather mercifully asks his brother to spare his former teacher. At the same time, as it's clear Gas can't wriggle out of Bardock's pin using either his strength or size, he attempts to form spiky armor, which digs into Bardock brutally. But even this doesn't seem to break the Saiyan's manic grip, as he simply hacks up some blood and praises how vicious the little Heeter is, whilst crushing it and holding him still all the while, gleefully boasting at how this is really gonna hurt, leaving him at the mercy of his teamwork with Devilman, who assures the Saiyan that he has nothing to worry about, if he's truly purged his evil ways, that is, not bothering to mention the alternative, as they both remember the incident in the desert. Spike fires the Great Devilmite beam into Gas, while Bardock hurls the now immobilized Runty bounty hunter high into the air. And subsequently, the great deal of evil inside of him detonates in a massive explosion. One Bardock notes really is far grander in scale than the one he suffered, which gives him just the slightest inkling of sympathy for the Heeter, as he knows firsthand it ain't a graceful way to go out. Figuring this must have surely been overkill, and has blown the enemy to pieces, the two rivals begrudgingly praise one another's performance, almost as if they are ready to bury the hatchet. But then, they feel it, Gas's ki still holding on doggedly, as with the last of his strength, he removes the crown of bones adorning his head. From the smoking crater emerges the new Gas, who is not only transformed, but largely healed, his bestial state of mind driving him to target Devilman first, as charging him at now extremely shocking speeds for a little guy, who has now become a very big guy. The demonic fighter can do little but brace behind his pitchfork to block, but even hellish iron doesn't stop the unleashed Gas, as he punches cleanly through it and into Devilman's stomach, which folds him up, knocks him into base form, and sends him crashing into one of the few remaining mountain ranges in the area in one single motion. This single strike is all it takes to incapacitate him as one of the Earth's strongest and most dangerous defenders, though just because the Devil's no longer in the fight doesn't mean he's left the details. As remembering what Spike said about keeping his cool, Bardock focuses not on overpowering Gas and making him suffer, but on what he's learned on Earth, like the drunken fist and ki suppression, as well as on the spirit of the Saiyans to contend with his new, even tougher opponent, who so far exceeds his power level. Briefly, he considers flying away to find the moon, or to try and create an artificial one to level the playing field, though he quickly realizes the increase in size will return the evasive advantage to Gas, and his own blind spots and weak points would also get bigger. Plus, while he's sure he could control himself in that state by now, it's possible his emotions and anger could still be unstable, making him just as liable to making mistakes as Gas has become now. It is at that moment that Bardock realizes his win condition, and so changing tack, he begins responding to Gas's big brutal swings and devastating blows, with seemingly insignificant damage that begins to quickly add up. Pot shots, low blows, dead legs, Charlie horses, pokes in the eye, wet willies, wedgies, and even pulling and swinging from Gas's locks in order to throw him or drive his knees and feet into his skull, more for the sake of being disrespectful and cheeky than to actually hurt him. And as expected, this only angers the Heeter more, egging him on to constantly be more erratic and burn more energy with wild untrained attacks, as he's not fighting like a warrior anymore, and all that power and rage of his is simply being wasted. He's little more than a dumb feral animal now, the sort Gine and Granola hunt without issue. Speaking of Granola, he has him as well as his mother to thank for this idea, as he never would have thought of it without his misadventures on Planet Cereal, and the time spent actually training and learning from Cerulean fighters, who use a similar, less his more philosophy of combat. Buoyed by his growing confidence that he can outsmart the animal his opponent has become, Bardock capitalizes on growing fatigue, and begins using his drunken boxing to redirect Gas's strong attacks into bigger mistakes, like hitting himself, overcommitting to become unbalanced, or kicking up dust that obscures his vision, and makes it even harder to breathe. Then, when openings like this are made, he shifts, going from a temperate and measured martial artist to the bold and savage Saiyan soldier he once was, exploiting guerrilla tactics and a level of wily ruthlessness to inflict creative and continual pain. Even in the rare few moments where Gas manages to actually land a decent hit, Bardock's spirit of the Saiyans and his own pride force him to keep contesting his raw strength with his superiors, so that never for even a second does he let up and give his foe a chance to breathe or recollect himself. From then on, there are no opportunities to stand or even see either, as a result of being left unable to fight despite being overwhelmingly stronger. While Gas's power begins to wane from fatigue and bewilderment, his only grows in response to the need to defeat this opponent, so that before long, under this limit-shattering assault from the more experienced warrior, Gas finally collapses, his energy expended, while Bardock remains on his feet, having saved his strength and kept his head. Guess he owes that pervert one after all. As Gas is downed, he reverts to base form, though being barely conscious at this point, it doesn't really matter. Nonetheless, not willing to let him rest until he learns what he needs to, Bardock once again hoists the run up by his hair, finding it far easier this time, while shaking him back awake fully, as he demands to know how Gas found them, how he got here, and what the hell the Heeters want. Unfortunately, even in a state of defeat, Gas will not surrender, petulantly pursing his now quickly swelling lips, and wordlessly daring the Saiyan to kill him, since he knows damn well he'd never talk and undermine his brother and family. Luckily, as he does understand that kind of loyalty and thoroughness, and thus is pretty willing, Bardock won't need to, as sensing Gas and Nappa's power drop through their scouters, two new entities emerge from the Crusher Corps ship, currently docked on the Earth's moon, and descend to the planet below. The first quickly flies to where Raditz and Nappa are, and touching down in a manner befitting a Royal Saiyan elite, Vegeta perches himself on a mountaintop, overlooking the wasteland battlefield, before discarding his own power level suppressing cloak, and loudly sneering that just when he thought Raditz may have gotten tough enough to be worth the smallest inkling of respect, he had to go and show him just how soft this planet has made the Saiyans here. Meanwhile, having no time for the brat skulking, Bardock growls at Gas to spill his guts, or he'll do it for him, though this is met with a laugh. Not from the Heeter, but from the fourth envoy, as landing with a truly earth-shaking crash behind Bardock, Turles snarks that he never did play well with others, but he'd be happy to enlighten his big brother. But that's where we'll be leaving this one off for right now.